Hi, this is Machiavelli, and I'm older than the esports historian here on Thorin's YouTube channel.
By the way, I know obviously you have done this like at the odd tournament from time. You just seem like you would be the most obvious person as a shoe-in to be a colour commentator. If that was a thing, like essentially if you could be like, whatever, I don't know, Andy Roddick or these people that can do it in tennis, you seem like you'd be a shoe-in. I mean, it's your whole mindset for the game. You could still be involved, etc., right?
Oh, yeah. I think like right now, kind of where my career will take me after competing will be probably like mental and like
performance coach or something.
Yeah, performance coach, exactly.
Right.
For like multiple different like esports stuff, and I kind of am already transitioning with that with Liquid now.
Right.
It's like beginning, but I also like if the right game came up, right opportunity, I would love to color commentate. And please, somebody get 40 and I to be a duo because oh man, him and I work really well together, and that guy is so funny. Yeah, I think it'd be great. But I think those are like the two avenues within esports that I could do something like continuing forward is to. And oddly enough, I feel like I'd probably be better at the performance coach and individual helping more so than, let's say, like overall coaching for a team. Because I think a lot of it has to do with being able to find things in review, like just finding the little things that set people back and trying to formulate ways to make it better. I think that's where I can succeed over a broad spectrum. So yeah, I think that's probably what I'll, and like I said, it's already kind of in the works, and that's, what I'll end up doing.
I can totally see, by the way, why you say that, because I even think to myself, like, as people will see in these interviews, you're obviously quite reflective even about other people's careers and what they could have done differently. But as I said earlier, the problem with that is that's where the barrier between we're rivals and we're friends, that's where the overlap isn't as easy, guys. Because like, put it this way, I'll give you a quick analogy from Counter-Strike. There was a similar thing in Counter-Strike where the two top North American teams, the weird thing was Team Liquid could beat everyone else, but they always lost to this Astralis team. But then Evil Geniuses used to bizarrely be like the counter to Astralis. And put it this way, the coach of the Evil Geniuses team even sort of told me that even though they were friends with Team Liquid, they'd be having the conversation like, oh wow, we always lose to Astralis, and he'd have to be sort of like, yeah, shit man, I don't know, that's crazy. But like, he wasn't going to tell him what to do, was he? That's
exactly why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the difference is, though, if you actually were the coach, I bet you'd be into that, right? I mean, think of some of these talents. If you think of some of the mega talents in Quake, it'd be awesome to be able to give them the nudge that would put them over the top or shore up some weakness, right? I imagine you'd find that very satisfying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've even tried to kind of give back to the community in a sense, not even just the community, but some of the pro players that have come up like within the last few years. Like there were times where I was trying to give them advice to try to come over certain hurdles to see what they could do. But eventually there comes a point where I cut that off because we're competing, but also you as a person, you need to learn how to do that yourself. Right. So it's like, I've led you as far as I can take you. And now the rest, it's hard, but you have to do it yourself. Right.
Yes.
So I've always tried to do that because I really didn't like how difficult it was for newer players to get the proper practice that they needed back in the day. It was very clicky.
Oh, sure.
It was tough to find passwords to servers for players that you wanted, let alone even if you got in, is somebody going to give you the time of day, or they're going to be like, oh, we're playing sets, which, sometimes I get it. You can respect it and they're practicing each other, but it was tough back then. And I don't want it to be that way for people. And especially in terms of like learning the game and like fundamentals of esports and FPS and stuff, I want people to have free access to that stuff. That's why, like, when we were coming from Overwatch, because I said it then, like at the beginning of Overwatch, I was like, this is a huge mistake for the scene. People should not be hiding all of their practice. This should be the kickoff moment where the integration of what can make esports different from sports, of having the fan interaction, of seeing the growth from practice to fruition in tournaments and how that affects people and personalities. Like, that was the time to do it. Like, who gives a shit if somebody comes up with a strategy that works one time? Like, that's not who's going to end up being the champion over and over again anyway, right? So that's why as soon as Quake Champions started, I said, dude, I'm streaming all my practice. I don't care if everybody gets to see what I can do. I'm going to find a way to make my game well-rounded enough that that doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, I'm going to find a way to win and be able to let it be so that people can learn and see how it should be done in terms of preparation, mindset, all that stuff. And just in general, like not be kind of like feel like they're blocked out. I want people to feel included. And I hope that people understand that going forward, especially like I think it's something that's useful now as we kind of look at esports as a whole, in that we are kind of on a downward trend again, right? If you think about like what happened around like 2007 to 2008 with the recession and how it dipped for a while and then started to come back up, like this is a chance to reinvent ourselves, as well as like, I know some rumors of some figures of salaries for certain players in certain teams of certain games. And to be honest, it's not justifiable for what people are putting in terms of like content.
Oh, it's obscene to just play the game and get 50,000 a month or something, isn't it? Yeah,
it's exactly. That is not sustainable.
Yes.
But if you all come together and start like making it a better atmosphere and scene for everybody, like, and make it more inclusive, and then because it is a tough thing as a player. Like if you have to decide, do I scrim 8 hours a day, and then how do I find the time and not burn out myself to stream to earn that income if you're somebody who has the numbers, right? Or it's almost impossible. You have to. That's why you see some players are like, you know what, I could earn more from just playing casually than competing. And so they did that route. And I don't blame them for doing that. Like, I think it's a smart business decision from their end. But I think that you could actually meld the two pretty easily. People just got to give up the ego of trying to hide their strategies and stuff like that. And also, like, people just need to be better on the mic in terms of what they say and what they don't. Like, we need to grow up. Yeah. You know, like, just hold each other accountable and be better people. Like, and I think it can be done. But, you know, that's not up to me. That's just, I think that's the direction that we should go overall.
Let me ask you a specific question about Kilson, because obviously he was one of the big figures in Quake Champions. The funny thing is, he's one of those people where he actually really did teach me not only how much a person can grow as a player, but how different games do emphasize different skill sets. Because he is one of those guys, I'll tell you straight up, when I used to watch him in QuakeLive, I was like, it's a bit one-dimensional. You kind of know exactly what he's going to do in a game. Essentially, if he hits the rails, he wins the game. If he doesn't win the game. And I actually always thought, people like you seem to be able to handle players like that. You were pretty consistent. You beat him almost every time, pretty much. Maybe that Gamescom, right? I always felt like you had a read on something like that. Whereas I even told him this, bro. He was the first person who really made me realize Quake Champions was something special. It wasn't just like a different, weird, watered down Quake. Because I remember thinking, bro, this is your game. Like, not only is there all these styles available, but one of them is literally your style, Kilson. That like don't take map control and do these weird like super off-angle rails on everyone. Oh yeah, like essentially, this is almost. And I even told him as well that Quake one that he won over Cool in that final. That's just like fucking 10 out of 10 level play, mate. Again, if I was Cool, I didn't know you could be mad with that. Like, what were you supposed to do? The guy just hit every shot in the game, it felt like, right?
Oh, yeah. And then his performance in that stage 3 final against Cypher, it was the same, where he was, you know, we talked about it for years in QuakeLive. Like, Kilson was the player who could potentially win, but was very streaky, right? If he was on his A+ game, he was probably one of the best in the world. Like, but it was trying to achieve that all the time. And I think part of what led to his success is what helped me in the team aspect. But for him, for Duel, people don't realize this, but Kilson actually was pretty good at Overwatch. Like in ranked,
right.
There were quite a few times he was top 50 in EU at DPS. Like he would play like Widow, Soldier, mostly hit scan stuff. But like the guy could play, so it like made him put himself outside of the box, play a game with different styles, get used to like having different abilities and things. So I think once he did that, and then once he saw Quake Champions, he was like, oh, I think I could take certain aspects of this and add it to my game, but use it in my way for this, right? And I think that's why we saw him shine in that aspect, because he wasn't afraid to step outside the box a bit, because yes, overall he has had a very defensive play style, very center fielder, center map type position player. But there have been some matches where if you watch his slash play, he is so unique and so fast with her. Like his movement is really, really good, where you would think coming from QuakeLive, oh, he's never going to be great at the movement champs.
Yes.
But he ended up getting really, really good with them. So where in that aspect where he pushed himself, I think from Overwatch, that time period did help him. it helped me with because I feel like my team coordination, like my comms and stuff, were pretty good for team already in QuakeLive, but Overwatch took that to the next level in terms of proper communication, what's needed, what's not, as well as not only handling myself but the emotional state of other players and being mindful of how people need to be talked to, what certain players that need hyped up, other players that don't, and you need to give them space, type thing, learning that, but as well as just learning how to lead even better. Because for 6 to 8 months near the end of Overwatch, I was the shot caller for the team, and also understanding. And I think most teams probably do it, but there's probably some teams that don't realize that they should be doing it. Is they put the in-game leader or the shot caller aspect to just one person, where that is actually a mistake. You should have a main caller and a sub caller, where the main caller makes the calls 70 to 80% of the time, but it's so difficult to be the guy that creates the plan and the play all the time perfectly. Whereas you have to trust your teammates who are feeling intuitively how the enemy is playing, that now, and they get it. Now is the time to do this play, and they just aren't afraid to speak up at that time, right? It's you're the main voice, but if they call for a call, they're like, maybe we should try this next round. I'm feeling, okay, let's do it, so that you don't have these times where you just aren't necessarily always sure what to do.
Sure.
And that really helped going into Sacrifice and in 2v2. For all of that, I was the most vocal throughout that, definitely. But there were a few times where I told them, I was like, look, I'll call and I'll get a feel of the state of the game of what we'll be doing. But, for WAS, ID at the first event, wins and to hang, right? I was like, if you guys are getting a feel for, speak up. We will follow it. Just remember that if I make a call of this is what's priority. And then, but please help out. And I think a lot of teams don't do that enough. And it was a really important lesson that if I hadn't been playing Overwatch, we might not have been as successful in Sacrifice and 2v2 because it would have taken me longer to learn that. But yeah, definitely. I know a lot of people looked down on Quake players playing Overwatch at the time that came, there were hardcore QuakeLive and Quake 3 fans, but I think it really helped a few of us going from Overwatch to Quake Champions, even though, people have tried to say it's a FPS Overwatch clone. It was in development long before that. That is no statement, right? But I think certain skills that we wouldn't have attained, it really did help transfer. It really did, and I really appreciate the time that I played and competed then, and I'm pretty sure Kilson would say the same.
And then our last player was vengeuR, obviously, another champion. Because this is a guy, what an interesting player. By the way, another thing I really think is super dope is I would genuinely, as a Quake fan, thank you to vengeuR and Razy for even being in the scene. Again, if it had only been the old names, look, for people who like nostalgia, that's cool. But it's also, then people would just say things like, but they were just on top because there was no good modern players. And these players did fit the bill. They were the modern great players. And the interesting thing is, not only does that guy have, it seems like the most chill personality of all time, but in the game, he's a demon, mate. His skills are fucking mega, right? Give me some thoughts on this guy.
Oh yeah, dude. I'm really proud of Marco for how he has carried himself as a professional. I think he's done a great job in terms of becoming. Well, he is from Sicily, but in terms of the Italian region, becoming the next pro after Sturmy. In terms of being professional, doing what's right, and really trying to go above and beyond. And I think he's a really good example to look at for younger players on what you need to do and how you need to carry yourself. Because yes, he does get you could tell it really hurts when he loses because he gives his all. Like I was saying, I never ever doubt that he's trying his best. When we're at tournaments and stuff, it's just been a joy to watch him grow as a player, as a person. And it's oddly enough, dude, the event that Razy beat me at in Italy is the event where that's where vengeuR began. The whole birth of him thinking that he could do it, because he was kind of showing some okay results online, and then he came to the LAN and he almost made it out of groups, and then we played, and he actually I think he took a map from me, if I'm not mistaken. He took a Woken from me and he played out of his mind. And the growth of him as a player from then on, you could just see the spark was he's got the fire, and this is the moment that he knows he can do it, right? And funnily enough, to see them end up being teammates and whatnot, and like that was Razy's win there, and then that's like kind of the start of vengeuR's legacy as well. It's like a really special event to like look back on. Yeah. And other than that, it was also really fun. Like the whole playing in the church thing.
Oh, it was a dope aesthetic, yeah.
Oh, it was so
Whoever
sick.
thought that up, full marks for the aesthetic. It was incredible, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I wish
That's
every
amazing.
QuakeCon looked like that. It looked bald. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about
amazing.
the reason I also asked that question before is because no one actually knew this, but in an insane way, like that KeenCon sort of was the last Quake Champions tournament in a weird way, even though it was obviously like a small event. Here's the question I have for you. It goes like this. Another thing I actually think is very admirable, I hope any professional gamers actually take note of this, is I know a lot of people, Rapha, who if they're a champion, especially if they're like a world champion many times over, actually if they go to a smaller event, if they go, they're almost going with the excuse built in, like, this is just practice for me. Like, if I lose, who gives a shit? I'm a QuakeCon champ, you know. I have always felt like whether the prize for first place is 2,000 or 20,000, I've always felt like you're able to engage and somehow still give your best. Is there a secret to that? Is it something you've been conscious about?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same in alluding to, you know, like how Jordan had to kind of motivate himself to push himself even harder. I may not have done it in the same way in terms of like trying to find, you know, maybe somebody said something about me that like fuels me to prove them wrong or whatever, but more so like, especially in regards to that tournament, right? We got the news right before, what was it? Either right before we were at Foundry or right after it was done.
Right.
We were going to have KeenCon, and I was like, you know what? The goal is to not. I can be sad as shit later about it. The goal is to give it my all and see if I can win the entire year. Like I've rarely been able to do it. It's so hard, but I want to see if I can. And so at the tournament, I gave it my all as if it was the QuakeCon finals. Like all the preparation and everything that led up to it, I still played it at 110%, you know. And oddly enough, that ended up being my second time where I didn't drop a map in a tournament, you know. Like, and I know there were probably a few players who were a little down, you know, while playing, but there were, you know, quite a few of the other ones, like, dude, Razy didn't want to lose again. Like Razy wanted to win that. Like vengeuR wanted to end the year on a high. Like Maxter wanted to make it back to the final. Like, but and then in terms of like over the years though, yes, I always aim for first, but I've been able to do a good job of, because you have to have the balance of, you have to be your biggest fan, but also your biggest critic. There's a lot of weird dynamic parallels that you need to, like contrasting thoughts that you have to kind of balance out in terms of mentality for competing. And sometimes you have to look at it like when there's minor events and then there's major events, that at the minor event, yes, you'd love to win it, but if you don't, it is a good time to maybe experiment once or twice, and you really find out in the heat of the moment how effective it is. Whereas, you know, just playing in practice isn't the same. So there's been a few tournaments where I've lost and I've been like, okay, it sucks, but I've actually learned what I needed to for the next one, and I'm going to go get them. And it ends up, you know, working out. So I think everybody kind of does that in a way, but yeah, no, I took every tournament last year, like full on and tried to win it, because like you said, you don't know when the next one's going to be. I mean, yeah, we have a 2v2 tournament for KeenCon coming up this year, but just flat out, it's really disappointing right now to not know what tournaments are happening at QuakeCon right now. It doesn't matter if they're like low prize money or just nobody knows anything. Like, so it's really hard for people to plan to go to do anything like that. So yeah, so who knows when the next time we'll be able to get together again is.
I feel as if a way that people could frame or characterize some of the things we've talked about in this interview is another skill that you have to have, it turns out, in Duel, is you're sort of coaching yourself, because that's one of the few areas in esports there aren't coaches actually in all the team games now. That's like a real role of people. Some teams, by the way, it seems like the NFL, they have a whole coaching staff. In league, people have positional coaches even, and a performance, all these things. It sounds like a big aspect of it is like you sort of have to play that role yourself. Would you have liked, if Quake had been one of the games that was in that vein in esports, would you have liked to have had a coach or someone you could have kind of like bounce things off who isn't a competitor?
I think Okay, for me specifically, no. I think that there are other players in Quake that really could have benefited from that.
Right.
I think for myself, though, a lot of lessons that I learned from my grandpa in terms of like handling and being patient and just trying to keep an open mind and always be learning, as well as, you know, just understanding how to be coached, what coaches are like, and trying to do that for myself from playing in sports and just appreciating sports in general. Right. And that aspect of it, for me, that's something that I've been able to do. And the thing has always been trying to kind of look at everything and be outside of it. Try to step outside of it and speak to yourself as if you're not yourself. What would I brutally honestly say to this guy that I really want to succeed? Like if they were my student, etc. And try to do that for yourself without sugarcoating shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you're trying to, you know, beat yourself into the ground, but be realistic about what your shortcomings are and what you need to do, and like, you know, hold yourself accountable for, no, you're making excuses right now compared to this is actually a problem and how do you solve it type of deal, right? But I think something I probably would have benefited from is just in terms of saving time, so just an analyst. I think an analyst would have been
just to watch demos and run numbers for you and stuff, right?
Yeah, somebody else to do that, give some statistics, you know, somebody to theory craft with. Like sometimes I was able to do the, like, you know, theory crafting with 04 and like the beginning of QuakeLive. Like we would, you know, kind of chat back and forth sometimes at the events that he couldn't go to. He'd be watching and we would talk about like, okay, what players are looking good right now? Like, what is my shape currently looking like? You know, how do I think that this new map should be played type thing, and just, you know, just talk in theory craft about the game a bit. I think that's always like really appreciative. I mean, Avik has alluded to it too. Almost every time that Avik and I have boot camp together, Avik has placed really, really well, because half the time we're probably only playing each other one set a day, and then both have the same, we want to play other people, right? But we talk about the game. We talk about like, you know, what other people are doing, why are we doing this, you know, like, etc. And it just really improves you and gets you more focused on being ready for everything, I think. So I think that, let's say another Quake comes out in the future, another arena FPS like it or something like that. If it's big enough, dude, I think, yeah, an analyst or like a coach could help. But I've noticed it's weird. Like you watch sports and the coach is so instrumental in every aspect of the game, but in esports it's like the coach is only supposed to be there for behind the scenes stuff, and then it's all up to the players, which is such a different dynamic, which is, you know, some things are good about it and some things are bad about it. It's just the way it is. Like for Counter-Strike, for example, I would like to see like a tournament or two, like where the coach is actually able to be involved the whole time. Let the players go in with the game plan and play, and let the coach try to do the big thinking during the game, and see how the fans like it. See, you know, that type of thing. I'd love to see something like that, because it hasn't been done before, you know, to where it's not where like they have to just wait until a timeout to talk to each other, and then they just have to sit back there and do nothing and just be on camera every once in a while, you know. But yeah, I think the more that esports are team modes, the more coaches are necessary for especially like getting players to deal better with one another. Because I think you have some guys that, yes, they do well in an environment like that, but not everybody grows up being social. You know, like a lot of times for people, video games are a good way to be an escape.
Sure. And
so like trying to deal with other people and how to get the best out of your play, but also your communication and how to effectively work with people, that can be tough. And a lot of the times kids are young coming into the scene, right?
Sure.
They need somebody to help them with that. I definitely think so. Like, you know, somebody to lean on in terms of like just learning. And I think it's really beneficial.
It's easy, since no one knows, is Quake dead? Is there still a Quake Pro League at all? Is there a circuit? It's easy for everyone now to be critical or to be annoyed or disappointed, but I want to just take stock for a moment, because I have to say, Rapha, when they first announced, like, first of all, when Quake Champions came out, obviously initially it was just the normal circuit of the DreamHacks, and maybe ESL's going to run a tournament. No one knew, would it be a big game? And even when they announced that first year with the prize money, I remember thinking, like, let's see how long this lasts. Like, I know what game devs are like. They might just get bored after a year or two, or they might think it doesn't, you know, maybe they're not selling extra copies of the game, and they might just go, maybe shut that down. I'm actually very impressed by how many years they kept this Quake Pro League running, and they put a lot of money in. Like, if people don't know, Rapha won a lot of tournaments in QuakeLive. You've won something like almost like 3 times more money in this thing, or 2.5 times or so. It's actually very impressive how much money they put in the scene. So it was kind of cool that QuakeLive wasn't it. We weren't just waiting for like one QuakeCon a year for maybe like a nostalgia tournament. Like, we got like a real Quake scene again. What would you say to this? I think it's kind of dope.
Oh no, I am really appreciative of the entirety of my time within the Quake Pro League, and to see it evolve and whatnot. Like, I mean, at the start they tried with like, and that's why the finals was a little different at 2019, is because they wanted to try to make it, the big idea was good. The execution was a little too tough to make happen, I think, over the course of like a year, but they wanted to make it kind of like MMA or boxing, in the sense that you have these title matches that are built up to, and that you don't have these big tournaments where it's like everybody runs through, but they want to build storylines and hype people up. So that's why, like, at the end, after the round robin, you saw the placement matches.
Right.
And then that's why, like, the first few stages were like, you didn't necessarily play everybody in your region. But it was a little too difficult, I think, to make happen, as well as because we were cross-continental. We had like split regions, and to be honest, like at the beginning, it was just Tim and I. To be in
Sure.
NA, right?
Sure.
Eventually, quite a few of the America boys, like, they got really good, but it took a while, and so it did retrospectively, it did feel unfair, and I understood that, like, from like the European players' perspective, that like I would gain all these points, and so I'd always have a really good rating.
Yes.
Right. Whereas like they feel like, well, I'm battling it out, every week against these really hard guys, blah blah blah, and. Yeah, and that's why eventually we went to, instead of it being split, we combined, which I think was the right thing to do. But yeah, I was really appreciative of just the whole thing in general. The fighting for the belt was great.
That was a cool gimmick too, yeah.
Dude, yes, the whole, and the thing is, like, I have them, the 3 that I've won, and the first one, it really is nice when I look at it every now and then, and I do see Cooler's name on the stage thing, or I see Kilson's from there, and everything, and just think about everything that went into it. It really is special, and I think all of the players really liked when we had at minimum 3 events. It felt really nice to have like 2 minor events and then the big finals. That felt like a really good format. The first year had 5. That was crazy. From QuakeCon to QuakeCon was 5 events. But yeah, and then coming up from QuakeLive, and yes, I earned well, but that's because I had to win. Only so many times, only the top 3 players would earn money back then. But you have so many good people there, right? But now it was a nice infrastructure to where, like, you had a good mix of younger players, but then players who had a job, but they could also then justify putting in some time to play, and they could justify the hobby that they were doing because they could earn something from it, right? And it also, I think that format is so good for younger players who are trying to prove themselves, because it helps to feel that progression of, yes, placing better, but also earning more. It really does. Like, I can't give like the exact details, but I mean, the big motivating factor for me going from 2008, after I'd won ESWC Masters of Athens, into 2009, is I had talked to Alex from SK, and I was like, hey, look, I think this would be really good for me about my contract going into this year. I was like, hey, I know that some of these guys are earning a salary, and I want to earn a salary too. I just won this, but I get that I shouldn't necessarily earn what they earn yet, because I haven't won as much, but I really want to prove myself. And so I set up with them a bonus thing. So every time I played 3rd, 2nd, or 1st, my salary for the rest of the year would go up by X amount. And as you could see, I was really motivated that year, and it worked out really well. But I think systems like that in place really help people to stay motivated, to get into it, and to really, like we talked about earlier, not get in the mindset of making excuses for themselves as well, and really pushing themselves all the time. And I really appreciate that about QPL, as well as not everybody knows this. I've talked about it on stream before, but guys, yeah, we had a lot of it online, but every single LAN event that we went to, Bethesda paid for the travel. They paid for the travel. Right. They paid for the hotel.
Right.
I think every event but one, we all had our own hotel room.
Because here's the thing, I mean, to make it explicit, obviously for you, that's not a problem. You're in Team Liquid. You could have gone anywhere. But yeah, if some guys, like if some random Polish player who's doesn't have a team had qualified, that would have been a big deal, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It gave the opportunity to quite a few players to be able to go who wouldn't have been able to.
That's awesome.
Which, looking back retrospect, I think it's the right thing that they did. And I'm really glad that they took care of us like that. I really appreciate that.
Respect.
Yeah, I do feel it's kind of sad. Like, I think more of the endemic orgs would have been involved in Quake Champions, like even earlier on. But there was this odd mentality from players of not seeing the bigger picture. And with the prize money the way it was in 2017, and then even if you're looking at like during the QPL, since people would earn money at their spots, like I think people needed to be willing to take the cut on some of their prize money for salary and representation, because A, overall it's good for the scene, and B, just having like a salary from somewhere, just a little extra, it's good.
Yes.
Like it helps you from day to day. You can use it for whatever, you can invest it, you can do whatever you want with it. But there were a lot of players that looked at it like, I got to take a cut from this and I'm not going to do it. So they would turn down sponsorship opportunities, like from, especially the first year, like from some pretty decent teams at that time, which, looking back on it, it's like it just makes me shake my head, you know. But yeah, I hope that if and I don't think that's a fault to like what they did. I think at the time they were looking at like what other esports were doing and helping, like that were being professional, and they were doing it the right way. And it's just a problem with like Quake player mentality at that time. So I hope that in the future, if there's another arena FPS, like that people don't botch that opportunity and we, you know, create more growth in that manner and more like eyes on the game and the genre, because it really is something special. And you could see it. There are more people that watch than play, and there have been for a long time. And yeah, I just want to see it become something great again at some point, even if it's not to the level of Counter-Strike, League, Dota, and all that stuff. Like, it still deserves its place. It's such a unique and wonderful game and genre to play. It's like, it just reminds me of like tennis or chess essentially with guns, really. Like, it's a super fast hyperspeed chess with like, I'll think of it like three-dimensional chess in that regard, you know. And yeah, I hope it ends up picking up in popularity again at some point.
My last real question before we wrap is going to be an expansive one, because I actually think one of the things obviously I love narrative and archetypal components and trying to, you know, find an analog for someone in another game or a sport like we were doing earlier with people. And what I would say is actually, I think it's actually dope, Rapha, is if people don't know the story, they've probably heard the basics. So basically, way back in the day, before Rapha actually was a top player, when he was just trying to become pro, he famously did make that comment in the interview, like I'm 5 steps ahead or whatever. And at the time, that was memed on so fucking hard, like so hardcore. Like this there was years where like every time he looked, well, I guess he was like 3.5 times ahead. Yeah, people had so many good memes. The problem is it's so memeable as well because of the 5 steps part. He had like a whole thing. But what I will say is actually dope is if this was a movie, that's like the perfect setup for your career. That really, if I had to define what your best strength ever was, it really was sometimes sort of being ahead of people conceptually in a specific match, in a moment in the game. It's kind of a cool through line, right, for your whole career.
Yeah, it was so funny that the quote even came to be, because it was like, because Carmack was doing the interview and he was like, "Hey, like, I know that you're gonna give me these like standard answers, but we need a little something."
Oh, he was provoking you
like,
a bit,
right? A little bit, but he was like, try to be, and I get it. He was like, try to be honest. Like, you don't have to be cocky, but try to be a little more honest. Don't be afraid to describe yourself, etc., because you need a little more hype around you to get you sent to the event, etc. Right? And it was true. And back then, so I thought about it, and like I said, that's what I really thought that was missing from a lot of players' games, is noticing that, like I said, everybody could play the first 5 minutes, but it's staying in it for the entire game and really seeing the consequences of your actions for the next 2 to 3 minutes. And you see it a lot with, like, over the years, players get so focused in on one fight, and then what happens after they win the fight? sometimes they lose track of timing,
Yeah.
and they don't remember the order, so then they make a mistake positionally, and now instead of just running away with the game, like just steamrolling, now it's actually still a game because they haven't been thinking ahead enough. They're thinking a little too much in the moment. And that's what I felt like I was on track to doing. And so I just tried to describe it like that. But I get it. It's so funny, man, because it was at that time I hadn't been able to prove myself yet. But I am really glad that I said it, and that it did kind of like I grew into proving it correct, you know? And
I hadn't thought that. I guess in a way it also put pressure on you to be that type of player. You better actually deliver and be like the genius player at that point in time, right? Yeah, true. I hadn't thought of that.
yeah, it's true. And
Right.
because like I said again, and thinking about the game like that, I've just tried to be honest about it. It's not like I said, I don't look at myself like, oh my God, I'm so much better than these other players. I have so much respect for all of the greats that I've gone against, and some players that I thought had great potential but decided not to, achieve it. And yeah, it's just.
I think you've also earned it, right? Because as you pointed out, you've also grinded pretty hard in the game. It's not like you meant I'm just a genius and I sit there and I know everything. Like I've also watched all the demos and thought about this guy and thought you earned that status, right?
Yeah, I have put in the work. That's for sure. Nobody can ever doubt that. And like I said before, hopefully I've set a good example for the generation following to follow, to understand what it takes if you really want to win over and over again, if you want to give yourself a shot. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I can give back to the community, to everybody, is to, just hopefully I've led the way for others in the future and then appreciate it from afar,
At the end of this interview, do you have a final message? Is anyone you want to thank or say hello to?
Yeah, probably a lot. Obviously, thanks to most of this was about Quake Champions, obviously, but thanks to SK for the years that I was with them. And we had when we parted, it was on very amicable terms. It was because they weren't wanting to pursue Overwatch at the time, and he was like, "No problem, you go for what you want to do." And for me to have been able to join Liquid, and first of all, just culturally as a team, because I think people don't remember what they were called back then. They were like the Forever Fourth Curse.
Oh,
like
true.
They would
League of
always
Legends,
get so
true.
close in all sorts of games that they were in, and they just couldn't clutch it out.
Yes.
And I remember there was he's not with them now, but he was the COO for a while, Mike Milanov.
Oh, sure.
And I was
Nation, if
talking
people don't know him, yeah.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody else, and it was about the decision of going to Quake from Overwatch. And I was like, look, I know that you don't necessarily know all of QuakeLive and stuff like that, but I want you to go look back at like what I've done, and I want to continue that legacy, and I want to be an example of changing the mentality of this around.
Right.
I want people to understand that no, Team Liquid is capable of success and professionalism, etc., blah blah blah, and I want to be a part of that. And I think you should fucking believe in me, and they did. And I'm really glad that they did. I know that there was a point there, people don't know this a lot, but after the initial World Championship, they were kind of debating on signing another player or not.
Right.
But they said, no, we're going to believe in you, and they stuck with me, and I'm really glad that they did. And that kind of fueled me to, like, I wanted to prove myself right for them. Like, I wanted to make them proud that they made the right decision. And so, yeah, the fact that I've gotten to play for two wonderful orgs over all these years, you and I have heard of nightmare stories time and again from other people. Like, I've been very, very lucky in that regard. I'm really appreciative of that. Other than that, dude, all my friends and my family, my mom, and then obviously, my dad that I lost when I was younger, my ex, who I lost a few years ago. And then, at the time I really wasn't looking for anything. And now my wonderful girlfriend who, I'm looking to live the rest of my life with,
all right. Congrats.
Kind of just everything just fell into place. Wasn't looking for it. And she's been so wonderful. And I love her so much. And, just been so good for me. And I'm just really blessed. And, Yeah, and obviously, thanks for the interview, man. And other than that, dude, again, I love the Quake community. I love all the people that I've had to play before, like the people that have come before, who I've had to compete against, and then, like I said, I look forward to seeing the next generation, and hopefully it's sooner than later. But yeah, other than that, hopefully we'll get to do this again sometime.
Everyone needs a support network, and mine is, of course, my Patreon community, the Scrominati, who in many ways, they're the Sonny to my Cher, saying, I got you, babe. So this video and all the others on my channel were kindly supported by the following names: Ahmed Haju, Mac Pugnaccio Rakula, Adam Tomlin, Animosity, Jensen Go, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Jerky's Minion, my main man, always going to be referenced, one of the best patrons of all time. Would you like to ask a question in my AMA? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest to say on my channel. Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming Reflections and Talk to Thorin interviews are. Maybe you want to do one of those long discussions where you get to set the topics we talk about. Well, if any of these or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.